This is Sunday Edition with Richard Pyatt. In this Sunday edition, the changing face of Utah.
When I talk to a lot of my friends or family members of how diverse my school is, they're like, wow, in Salt Lake.
If demographic trends continue, minority will eventually become majority, nearly statewide.
I love this country. I want my children to be born here. I want to raise my family here.
I love Utah. I think it's the perfect place to live.
What does Utah's future look like, and how do we prepare for the challenges and embrace the opportunities?
The rules of the game have changed.
We'll explore these issues as we examine how we are coming to our census. All in this Sunday edition.
Good morning, I'm Richard Pyatt. Depending on where you live in the state of Utah, it might be hard for you to recognize how the demographics of this state are changing and the impact it's having. All week long, KSL and the Deseret News have teamed up to produce this series of special reports. There is definitely an east-west divide in our state, separated by I-15. Right now, I'm standing at around 5th West and 600 South. To the west, minorities make up the majority of the population. To the east, minorities make up about a quarter of the population. Our young, rising generation is very diverse, and the future of our state depends on their success.
We do maintain our signature demographics, meaning we are still the youngest state, but we're getting older. We still have the highest number of children per woman, but the number of children per woman is going down. We don't have as many racially and ethnically diverse populations as some places in the nation, but we're becoming ever more so.
Take Salt Lake City. From 2000 to 2010, had it not been for minority growth, population would have declined. Jacqueline Robles immigrated from Veracruz, Mexico. During that time, she had 3 children.
Because it's nice and quiet, it's a place where Mexicans can feel at peace.
Across town, another immigrant family is carving out a new life.
It's very important for my kids. They have opportunity to go to school and learn.
Salt Lake City is a refugee receiving area. From 1995 to 2005, about 1 in 10 immigrants came to Utah with refugee status. Zainab Kita fled Liberia and then the Ivory Coast with 7 children. The economy and a better school system brought Joan Lind and her husband from California back to Salt Lake City.
I felt like the education system in California was irretrievably broken.
3 mothers, all living in Salt Lake City with very diverse backgrounds but common struggles. They all work, as do most mothers in Utah.
So it's very difficult to have to work and raise children at this time.
They are all involved in their child's education and worry about college.
My kids know that they need to go to college, but they know that we can't pay for them to go to college.
Zainab's eldest son just graduated from high school, the first person in his family to achieve that. He'll attend college on a scholarship.
I think it's important for me, going to college, not only for myself, but also to set a good example for the other kids.
But what does the future hold for his siblings, the Lind children or the Robles children? In Utah, white students have a significantly higher high school graduation rate than minority students do.
There are a few things that we can control about the future, but one of the things we can control is that if we get that next generation educated and healthy, they will do better than they otherwise would have.
Since we know where we're headed, we have the chance to find opportunities and create solutions. KSL and the Deseret News will take a closer look at how our changing demographics will affect healthcare, crime, education, and attitudes in the state of Utah.
Along with change comes some growing pains and some misperceptions, and that's another reason to do this series, is to kind of dispel myths and help us move along in a positive way with the change.
Attitudes about demographic changes may be influenced by age.
Well, it looks a lot different than it does to us getting older baby boomers, because when we were born there were not many immigrants and we had a pretty racially, ethnically, and culturally homogenous community.
The Great Depression and World War II halted immigration, but if you look into the past and toward the future, you get a better picture of immigration and population growth.
The youth see this as a positive development, that we are part of a global community.
One of the challenges of living in a diverse population is overcoming stereotypes. According to an exclusive KSL Deseret News poll, most Utahns think having a more diverse population is a good thing. But almost half of those polled also said they believe there are cultural differences in various races and ethnicities that make one group of people more prone to committing violent crime than others. We got some perspective on that from Salt Lake City Police Chief Chris Burbank.
I think there's a lot of bias. I think there's a lot of perception from the media. And one of the first things that I'm always asked whenever there's an event that occurs and people are talking about, okay, are they documented, right? Are they illegal in the country? And then what is their race? What is their, and I think that plays so much into the lead of everything that we do. And I mean, it's part of our culture, you know, it's ingrained. Officers, right? The first question you ask, okay, what color was the person who robbed you or did whatever else? And so there is certainly a perception there that there is an association. And also, I mean, I think the thing that's interesting as you look at, we actually in this country, and for years, have incarcerated minorities at a higher rate. But as you look across the country, and this holds pretty true no matter where you go, that if 35% of your population is Hispanic, then about 35% of your crimes are going to be committed by Hispanics. In our particular case, about 60% of the population is Caucasian. About 60% of our crimes are committed by Caucasian individuals. And so it really holds more true that crime is representative of all communities, and I think there are other factors that come into play much more significant than race, such as socioeconomic issues. I think poverty is one of the things that is a bigger indicator of criminal activity than is status or race.
When it comes to income, poverty, education, and home ownership, the gap between whites and minorities is actually larger now than it was before the Civil Rights Movement. Deanie Wimmer takes a closer look at the education gap in Utah and the role language plays.
Right now, more than 1 in 10 of America's school children are learning English as a second language. By 2030, experts estimate that number will be 40%. Of course, that presents unique challenges for schools. The Granite District has found a way to bridge the achievement gap, and experts around the nation are watching closely.
¿Qué tan importante es la educación para tu familia?
16-year-old Mariela Hernandez plays a crucial role in her family. She is their link to the English language.
I like to help my mom and everything.
But when she started school, there was no one at home to help her.
It was terrible. Yeah, because when I first came to school, I didn't know English.
Got it? Closing the gap between English learners and native speakers is a challenge in the Granite District, where ESL students speak more than 100 different languages.
We have had a lot of these children come in the first day not understanding a bit of English.
But the school district has found a way to close the gap through a remarkable preschool program. Mariella's sister, Devani, is one of the many success stories.
She came in last year very shy, very quiet, no English. Now she's outgoing, very social.
The key is the curriculum. Most preschools are play-based. This program focuses on pre-academic skills.
We also started working on pre-math skills. We did many things with alphabet knowledge.
And they bombard students with English vocabulary.
Where would you like to go visit?
But at home,
we encourage them to keep speaking their first language.
Math test scores show how well this program's working. By the 3rd grade, kids at the most high-risk schools who had preschool are testing at almost the same levels as kids who attend schools with the highest income levels.
It's not just ending preschool on target. It's going on up into 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade.
The U.S. Department of Education is studying the program's success. Granite District is part of a team that is a finalist for a national award. And State Senator Aaron Osmond plans to reintroduce a bill next year that would create funding for a pilot project to take this program statewide.
It has to be accessible to all families, families who are living in poverty, families who want a choice different than private preschool, families who speak a language other than English. It has to be accessible, that everybody can get to it, and that's what we offer. Everybody has access.
The State Office of Education is leading an initiative to improve reading skills for at-risk students, and you can read more about that in the Deseret News.
The most visible sign of Utah's shifting demographic terrain is found in the retail and consumer sector. According to census numbers, the growth rate for Latino-owned businesses in Utah is one of the fastest in the nation. Scott Hawes reports.
Jicama.
A bakery.
The cakes are tres leche.
And fresh cut meats.
Bone for $6.99 a pound.
Rancho Markets recently opened its 7th store on 33rd South in Salt Lake City. The company is owned by Ellie Madrigal. She grew up working in grocery stores in Mexico and Nevada, and when she moved to Utah, she decided to start her own business. That was in 2006, a period in which the number of Latino-owned businesses in Utah grew dramatically, jumping 78%. CEO Dick Harwood credits Rancho Market's success to serving the needs of the public.
There's been an underserved niche in the grocery business in Utah, and Rancho Markets has found a way to serve that niche.
A niche that many businesses were slow to recognize.
And I think that the World Cup was a huge missed opportunity for mainstream businesses to send their message out.
Olga De La Cruz leads the Utah Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. She has educated many businesses on how to better target the Hispanic market.
We try to educate them about what are the different holidays, what are the different beliefs, cultural norms.
Companies that are beginning to aggressively target the Hispanic market are seeing payoffs.
I think slowly they've come to that realization that the Hispanic market is definitely a market where there's money spent.
Hispanics spend about $6.5 billion in Utah in 2010. That number continues to climb. In Salt Lake City, I'm Scott Hawes, KSL News.
While the evidence of Utah's growing Latino population can be seen on store shelves, that clout has not yet reached state politics. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at the strength of the Latino voting bloc. Welcome back to this Sunday edition special report, Coming to Our Census. How we deal with immigration reform moving forward will have a huge impact on future generations. On Monday, the Supreme Court threw out key provisions of Arizona's crackdown on illegal immigrants. But the justices ruled a much debated portion could go forward on checking the status of suspects who might appear to be in the U.S. illegally.
So today is a day when the key components of our efforts to protect the citizens of Arizona, to take up the fight against illegal immigration in a balanced and constitutional way, has unanimously been vindicated by the highest court in the land.
I believe it's the most venomous part, based on race, based on nationality, and based on racial profiling.
That U.S. Supreme Court decision may influence a federal judge who's expected to rule very soon on Utah immigration legislation passed 2 years ago. The man at the center of that hard-line approach has now taken a more compassionate stand. I sat down recently with former Representative Steven Sandstrom and talked about his change of heart.
I think early on I got caught up maybe in the emotional part of everybody that's here, that's illegal, is a bad person.
2 years ago, Steven Sandstrom led the charge for immigration reform in Utah and sponsored the controversial bill, House Bill 497.
Probably some of the rhetoric that went along with the bill, I think maybe went a little too far.
Sandstrom traces the beginning of his transformation to an encounter after a political event with a young woman named Sarah.
And she told me her life story. And it just broke my heart. And it wasn't until after she graduated from high school that she wanted to get a job, wanted to go to college, earn some money for that, that her parents finally told her that she was here illegally.
Sandstrom says he couldn't forget her story and says he began to realize how many people are in similar situations through no fault of their own.
We do not have a good immigration system in this country.
Sandstrom says his change of heart didn't happen overnight. He had lengthy conversations with leaders from the Latino community, Bishop John Wester, and leaders from the LDS Church.
And I feel badly that I maybe offended people in certain ways that tried to put everybody here illegally in a box.
Sandstrom has faced a lot of backlash and lost a lot of political support because of his moderating views. He doesn't believe that's why he lost his bid for Congress, though. For the first time in almost 20 years, Sandstrom will not hold a public office, but he says he plans to stay involved in the immigration debate.
But I don't want to be like it's something that's helping me for a political victory. It's truly about wanting to do the right thing.
Net immigration to this country from Mexico has actually declined to zero and may actually be negative. This reversal is significant, but will it change attitudes or policies? According to an exclusive KSL Deseret News poll, 74% of Utahns believe illegal immigration in Utah is still a serious problem. The path to legal U.S. citizenship is not an easy one. I sat down recently with an immigration attorney to talk about the process.
I've heard the phrase, why don't they get in line? The truth is, for most people who are here without documents, there was never any line for them to get into.
We looked at the current visa bulletin. Wait times for a Mexican adult child of a permanent resident are up to 20 years. And for those already in the U.S. without documents?
So when you talked to me earlier about the 10-year-old child who's now in his or her 20s, if the person qualified for residence, the person would, in most circumstances, have to leave the country. Upon leaving the country, that person would be prohibited from coming back for 10 years, even if there were a visa waiting for that person.
Political activists are working hard to reach Hispanic voters and get them all out to the polls. For the first time in Utah history, the Salt Lake County Clerk is publishing ballots for this upcoming election in both English and Spanish. John Daly reports.
That ballot requirement triggered a requirement of the Federal Voting Rights Act. According to Pew Research, the Latino population boom did help Utah gain a 4th congressional seat, but so far Latinos in Utah have yet to find a strong voice.
Your voice will matter when you make it matter.
25-year-old Rudy Miera is making sure his voice gets heard. He's president of the Utah Federation of College Democrats and on the board of PACE Latino.
We would particularly like to get the younger Hispanics out.
Historically, Latinos have not turned out as voters.
In 2010, the Latino vote in Utah was about 8 to 9% compared to a general population identified in the census data of 2010 of 14%.
Key issues that could drive Latinos to the polls this fall: the economy and immigration.
All my life I've been asked, so when did your family come here?
Miera's family is deeply rooted in Utah history. He's a 5th-generation Utahn, and his great-grandfather, Bernardo D. Miera, helped map Utah. But still, he says his family's immigration status is routinely questioned.
The majority of the Hispanic community is affected by it.
Miera believes immigration reform is dependent upon a stronger voice from the Latino community. He would also like to see more Latinos run for office.
The more they see other Hispanics involved, the more they're going to get involved.
Statewide, about a dozen people who identify as Latino have filed to run for elective office, but only a few ran in high-profile races. Ross Romero ran for Salt Lake County mayor, but didn't make it out of the Democratic convention, and Attorney General candidate Sean Reyes lost the Republican primary.
I've never run based on my ethnicity. I've run on my credentials. I've run on being the most qualified candidate, but I do think I'm proud of my communities, and I do think it's a healthy thing for Utah to have diversity, whether it's in politics or business or just the general community.
Miera is also optimistic about what the booming Latino population could bring to Utah.
I feel like Utah has a bright future and has so much potential.
Latino voters could be crucial in the race for the White House. President Obama and Mitt Romney are trying to woo those voters in crucial swing states like Colorado, Nevada, Virginia, and Florida, and they've begun running Spanish language ads. In Salt Lake City, I'm John Daly, KSL 5 News.
By the year 2050, Utah's population will double. When we come back, we'll talk about ways to handle that growth. Utah is one of America's fastest growing states. Over the last 10 years, the state's population grew by 24%. Hispanics accounted for most of that growth. By the year 2050, our state's population will be about 5 million people. How we grow will affect how we and our children live. Joining me now to discuss the future moving forward in regards to our changing population are Rebecca Chavez-Hauk, representative from the state of Utah and also on the board of Envision Utah, and Natalie Gochner, who is also on the board of Envision Utah, but also on the board of Prosperity 2020. What are the goals of Prosperity 2020 with regards to the changing demographics of the state of Utah, Natalie?
You know, Prosperity 2020 is the largest business-led movement to improve education in our state. We have as a goal to have 66% of all adults in the state to have either a college degree or a certificate, so that we have a very trained workforce that will ensure our prosperity long term.
How big of a challenge is that when you're talking about an emerging population that was formerly considered a minority?
It's an enormous challenge. We have somewhere around 45% of our state that now reaches that criteria. So in 8-10 years, we've got to make up a 20-some-odd% gap. It's going to take the full effort of our community leaders, business leaders, and government to help make that happen. But it's essential to our long-term prosperity as a state.
Representative Chavez-Hauk, is the same kind of challenge when you're talking about encouraging businesses moving forward as far as Envision Utah goes?
Well, in essence, Envision Utah is kind of the wraparound. It's looking at what is going to be happening, the totality of growth, though, kind of what the environment looks like, what the community looks like, what support services and infrastructure will look like for this growing community. What we're looking at is, will the community be ready for this growth in population and the changing demographics? You know, what will our communities look like? What will housing look like? What will town centers look like? What will transit look like to support economic development and a good quality of life for all of our Utahns, including our changing demographic population?
Natalie, how big is the language barrier when it comes to the education component in this? Is this something that can be factored in a useful way?
Well, it's huge. We have in our state several school districts that are what we would call majority-minority districts, which means that they have a larger minority share of their population than they do of a Caucasian. And if you look at test scores and the things that matter in terms of educational achievement, it's not race that matters. It's socioeconomics and the language spoken and the language barriers that these children face. It's been a priority of Prosperity 2020 to have the legislature fund optional all-day kindergarten as a steady budget item. We also need them to fund professional development, so teachers have the training and tools, resources to teach a more diverse population. We are also asking our legislature to do a lot of accountability funding, which helps us fund all of our measures of teacher achievement, classroom achievement, and the like. And then finally, I'd point out that the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, that's a major focus of Prosperity 2020, and we need more of that, and we need to get all of our children interested in math and science.
Now, for both of you, this is really a long-term effort, isn't it? Getting communities to rethink the way we've always done things, to rethink the way that we're going to be moving forward. How big of a challenge and how long do you think it's going to take to get to where we need to be?
Well, you know, we have these long-term goals, and it's always good. I mean, that's part of what Envision Utah does, is think of really far out as to where we want to be in the next 2 or 3 decades. But there are a lot of short-term successes we can achieve. As Natalie mentioned, if we continue to fund proven best practices that we know work with many of these minority populations, and also try to eliminate some of the barriers that these students run into in terms of financial support in higher ed, as well as with our local schools. Those are those short-term offerings that we can provide as legislators and as a community. It's both the long-term and the short-term combined that come out with our ultimate success for our home.
And Natalie, anything to add?
Well, Rich, I would just add, I mean, we have a state that has the most unique demographic profile of any in the country. We have the highest fertility rates, the largest family sizes, the lowest median age. We're always one of the most rapidly growing states. We ranked 3rd in the 2010 census. So we have these huge demographic challenges and opportunities. The opportunity is to go educate and train these children so that they can represent us in a globally competitive economy.
Thank you very much for joining me this morning, Natalie Gochner for Prosperity 2020 and Representative Rebecca Chavez-Hauk from Envision Utah. And thank you for joining me this morning as well. You can find more in-depth coverage on KSL.com and in the Deseret News. Have a good rest of your weekend. Thanks for joining us. I'm Richard Pyatt.